where does it all begin? It begins with us and our shape. Shapes have energy, sacred geometry, sacred sites, crop circles. Now, the most fascinating thing about the phi ratio, the golden section, is that our body is built around the golden mean, the golden section. Leonardo da Vinci, in this drawing of his, the measure of man, he found that if you basically go from the top of the head to the navel, that if that's the unit of 1, then from the navel down to your feet is 1.6. It also works throughout your body with your bone structure. If the first digit of your finger is the unit 1, the second bone in your finger digit will be 1.6 times the length of the first digit, and the third bone will be 1.6 times the length of the second digit throughout your entire body. This is called the phi ratio, the golden section. It seems to suggest that we have an inner structure, a function that somehow in our universe, the ratio 1.618 roughly, is a function around which biological systems are built, and it possibly may suggest that we are like an antenna structure that can receive etheric information, like a crystal, which I'll go into in a second. But basically, we can receive information because we're built like an antenna structure. You can also see this in different types of... Next slide, please. The phi ratio, if you build a series of nested boxes in the ratio of 1.6 to 1, here would be 1.6 to 1. You connect the dots, you get the golden mean spiral. Many aspects of biological structures are built around the golden spiral, including our inner ear and the heart muscle, and also other various structures. We heard yesterday about how blood in our body flows in a spiral twisting form, and it's partly because the morphology of our body is built around golden mean spirals and golden sections. Many other things are also built around the golden section, the nautilus shell, and whirlpools and cabbage. And of course, galaxies are built around these spirals, and in some cases, golden mean spirals. So we know that the spiral is a kind of a motif, an archetype that permeates our universe, and it seems to be one key to why information and energy can move through different types of systems in the way that it does. Now, an important aspect of the morphology of spirals is that the type of science that most of us learned in high school and elementary school was built around a mechanistic model. The mechanistic model likes to take the universe and divide it into pieces, and then use a causal linear chain of explanation to describe the effect of A on B on C. This is the technique invented by Descartes and Newton and people from the scientific revolution. It's a very powerful system. It can get people to the moon and to Mars, but it really doesn't describe the world below the atomic level. It doesn't describe subatomic particles, and it doesn't describe the way a lot of energy moves. The other type of energy that we have in the universe, the other type of scientific model that we're getting from subtle energy science, is that below the surface of matter is a field of energy and information that is naturally coherent. It's naturally coherent because if you leave it alone, it will naturally form patterns. Now, this is an example of it. These are patterns of sand that are made by a device that was called a harmonograph that people used to play with in Victoria, England, after dinner. Before the days of the internet and television, people would find interesting things, games to play after dinner, things to do. They would play with this harmonograph. Now, I just enjoy these pictures because not only do they look like things like crop circles, but they show us that nature has an inherent order, an inherent coherency that is underneath the surface. And if you just create a device that swings back and forth, lo and behold, it will create coherent shapes. Some of them have a spiral type appearance to them, and they're just beautiful to look at. But it shows us that nature has, in contrast to this type of war of all against all, this paradigm that we've had in economics and in our scientific paradigms, that nature is conflict, that it's a zero-sum game, there's not enough to go around for everybody, so you have to scramble to the top to get enough. There's another paradigm that suggests that nature is coherently orderly, inherently orderly. It creates planets, it creates solar systems, it creates spiraling galaxies, and it also creates patterns. Those patterns, I believe, are at work when we do viewing. The brain naturally has the ability to entrain with the RV signal and naturally create a coherent description of the information effortlessly. The only effort is to actually get past your ego mind, which wants to prevent you from doing this for whatever agenda it has. But the process of viewing itself, when the information comes through, it's fairly effortless. Now, fractal geometry is just another important aspect of our shape. Fractal shapes are those that are densely packed with information. You may have seen these pictures in calendars or in different settings, but basically the essence of a fractal is that the more you magnify it, the more information you see. This is very different than the type of linear geometry that we've been brought up with that breaks everything down and resolves it to straight lines like calculus does. But what fractal geometry shows us, and this was discovered about 100 years ago, but they were so horrified by it, they said it was like a mathematical monster and it was relegated to the closet because it was not orderly. But, of course, nowadays fractal geometry is used for satellite compression and JPEG images and all sorts of wonderful information compression technologies. The thing about fractals is that our bodies are built around fractals. If you look at something like your cardiovascular system, it's a branching structure. It starts with your lungs and breaks off into arteries and smaller capillaries. You have about 50,000 miles of arteries and capillaries in your body. How does nature do that? It's using a branching type structure, just like a fractal. Fractal type structures are capable in a finite space of having a lot of energy transfer. Your cardiovascular system needs to have a lot of oxygen transfer to all of the trillions of cells in your body. It does this using a fractal branching structure. You can also find fractal structures in trees and in mountain ranges and many other types of living systems where you need a lot of energy and information flow. I would also like to suggest here that fractal geometry helps us with subtle etheric energies too. Fractal geometry also creates very many natural-looking structures and objects. And so fractal geometry is more of a natural type of math than the traditional type of math that we've all been brought up with. Now, another aspect of the theory about why this works is crystallinity. We've long had the theory with the crop circles that the crop circles are acting like crystals. But we know that crystals pervade our planet, the crust of our planet, silicon, and that we have liquid crystals floating in our blood, in our bodies. And I would like to suggest that human beings are, in fact, living liquid crystals. Crystals have the ability to change sounds into shapes, vibrations like a phonograph needle into an electrical signal, or vice versa. You could put an electrical signal into them like a quartz watch and get a very even mechanical motion from a crystal. So what crystals have the ability to do is to transform one type of energy into another type of energy. When we receive the etheric RV signal from wherever it comes from, a non-local quantum source, however it actually works, our body somehow naturally knows how to take that signal and turn it into feelings, into words, onto words on your page. It's quite possible that the crystallinity of the human allows us to do that. Now, this is not, and this is a perfect example, by the way, of a liquid crystal and a spiral forming in a liquid crystal. So crystals, when they're in a liquid form, also form coherent patterns naturally. Cymatics is another area that we heard about yesterday, and cymatics is this phenomena that the Swiss scientist Hans Jenny discovered, the ability of sounds to create shapes. This is simply turpentine on water, and when you broadcast a specific sound into the water through cymatics, as Freddie Silva told us about, it creates these shapes. The shapes themselves, again, are naturally coherent. It works the other way, too. Every object that exists is creating a subtle type of infrasound. And people have suspected perhaps that the crop circles are generating infrasound, too. But nonetheless, sound can become a shape, and shapes can become sound. And this is, again, why your body is able to decode the signal line of the RV signal, because everything that exists creates its own sort of quantum sound. And that signal is coherent, and you can pick it up and perceive it and turn it into a coherent shape on your page. This is just simply a person singing into a steel plate, a device that's hooked up to a steel plate, and look how the sand naturally forms coherent patterns. It's very beautiful to look at, it's very symmetrical, and it's resonant. And this is what light looks like at a subatomic level. Again, very crystalline, very orderly, and very coherent.